Hi everyone, I'm Canada Master Isaac Steincamp from Chess Summit, here to let you know that we haven't forgot about you. We know that you guys have been following our channel and been waiting for the latest videos to come out, so I decided today, instead of writing an article, I would make a video and share it with you guys here on YouTube. A lot of things have changed on Chess Summit since the last time we made a video. We have a bigger team now. We're actually about to introduce a new writer next month from Texas, so that's going to be really exciting, so be on the lookout for that. And you may have noticed I'm actually wearing some Chess Summit apparel here. We've got a bunch of cool designs. I'm going to put the link below in the description, but any one of these can be yours. We've got hoodies, we've got shirts, we've got all that stuff, and all different sort of sizes on Teespring, so definitely make sure to check that out. Follow us on YouTube, follow us on Twitter, follow us on Facebook, however you want to get your news about Chess Summit. So the last article that I wrote, I talked a little bit about my tournament in Chicago and how, okay, despite a couple of mistakes, I played at roughly the level I wanted to, but with the exception that there were some flaws in my calculation. And I had about a week to turn over and go into New York, which happened about a week and a half ago right now. And, okay, I did 4.5 out of 8 over 2 4-round tournaments. I could have done better, but I also could have done worse. I learned a lot about myself in terms of rapid chess, which was really helpful. Rapid doesn't really test your deeper knowledge of the position. It's all about tactical recognition. So some of the games I felt like maybe I was worse, but I won because I simply had a better tactical analysis than my opponent, or I just controlled my anxiety better. Or maybe I was better out of the game and then I lost because I tried to convert too quickly and I miscalculated a tactic and I gave my opponent a free point. Those things happen. Then, of course, there's all these opening sidelines that are completely unsound, and with more time over the board, you would actually be able to figure stuff out. But with G30, G45 kind of time control, it's really hard to do that. So, I found a couple holes in my games from New York, but none of them really seemed relevant for my preparation for the Chicago Open. And as last week, I was kind of moving out of Pittsburgh into Richmond, where I'm now, in my hometown, and going to my girlfriend's graduation, not to mention also Balin Lee's graduation, who also writes on Chess Summit. I've been really busy this past week. So, I gave myself a month to get ready for the open section of the Chicago Open. I don't think I'm ready, so I'm actually switching down to the under 2300. I'm still going to get a lot of tough opposition there. That's not to say that, I'm going to play easy people now. But I think it's a nice change. There was an article that came out in the Wall Street Journal, I want to say back in December, where there was this kid who had never learned how to play chess, and he tried to learn chess in a month and then play Magnus Carlsen and just try to remember computer moves or something. That's obviously not the kind of preparation that I'm doing, but I can kind of relate to that in the sense that, if you're going to try to play at a couple hundred rating points above your rating level, you got to give yourself more than a month. And that's one of the things that's really hard about being both a college student and a competitive chess player, is that if you want to do both really well, sometimes you have to make concessions and it can hurt your game long term. So I'm hoping that in playing under 2300 Chicago Open, it'll prepare me for future events in the summer. The summer for me is just starting. I have until August before I have to really start worrying about, I have to go back into school mode and, just stick to streaming and Chess Summit and all that. So not too worried there. I'm looking forward to what chess in DC, local chess in DC might be like, so that's something that I'm kind of excited about. But for now, I'm just kind of relaxing and getting ready for the Chicago Open. I want to apologize for getting this post out a little bit late. Ideally, I would have gotten this out by 9 a.m., but I've been packing. I'm about to go to Chicago, followed by Vegas and LA, and for about a 2-week trip, so it's been a little bit hectic here. But finally, I found some time to record this video, and I figured I wanted to share one of the games that I played in New York, compounded with some other themes that I've learned. And maybe some of you guys already kind of know my opinions on the Dutch, but I don't think it's been phrased any better than how Anish Giri put it when I was in Reykjavik. He said in one of his post-game conferences that the Dutch is a really interesting thought experiment. It's basically a King's Indian at tempo up because you're playing f5 without having to move your knight on f6 out of the way. One of the ideas in the King's Indian is that you fight the center by playing f5 and then maybe even f4 and then kind of storm on the king side. With the Dutch, you've already kind of established that. But one of the things about the Dutch is what happens when your opponent challenges your structure. What happens if your opponent doesn't let you get that simple system? And what I wanted to talk about today was I want to share a game where, my opponent didn't play very well, but I basically found his one idea and I took it away and all of a sudden his position fell apart. And then I wanted to kind of show another game where my opponent tried to play Stonewall, but by simply kind of avoiding a certain idea, the black kind of didn't really have the position that he wanted out of the opening. So kind of the message for today's video is kind of twofold. I think c4 is a great weapon if you know your opponent's going to play the Dutch and you're just limited to playing 1f5 on move 1 if you play a d4 or c4 opening. And also the Dutch is really risky. Like, that's not to say it's a terrible opening, but I do think that if you're going to play the Dutch, you really have to know the theory. And for those of you guys who actually watched my stream yesterday, where I played Balin Lee in 2 matches where we had to play openings that we didn't know, I did fine in the game where I played the King's Indian attack as white. We got kind of like a peaceful draw there. But with black, I played the Dutch, and I by move 10, I was out of my understanding, and Balin had an interesting tactical idea, and I got wiped off the board. And that's just how things are in the Dutch. Not too much to say there. All right, but let's go ahead and get started. I don't want to keep you guys waiting forever. So the game that I played this weekend, I started with c4. My opponent played f5. And so in the second game I'm going to show you what happens when I played knight f3 on move 1. But in this game, I want to show you what happened when I played this move g3. And what I'm kind of doing is I'm kind of waiting for my opponent to establish a structure. And basically, this is a game of elimination, in terms of opening move order. You don't really have to know a lot of theory. You just have to know the different setups that you can go into. So black has a lot of options here. He can play knight f6 like he did in the game. He could play e5. He could play e6 with the idea of a stonewall. But what I have done with g3 is a lot of like this classical birds opening idea, b6, is not really realistic because I'm going to get to g2 first. And that's actually why my opponent kind of went off the beaten track. And so my opponent chose knight f6, but he played, if he had played e5, we just get a reverse Sicilian. And if you play the English, you kind of know this stuff. You can play for like knight c3, you can play bishop g2, and just kind of get a basic setup. So my opponent played knight f6, which is typical in the Dutch move order, and I played bishop g2. And the reason I'm going to wait to develop this knight is, my opponent was like 1700, and I had a suspicion that he had probably watched like a video on the stonewall. Maybe it was like a Simon Williams video or one of those like Valerie Lilov videos or something, where he watched like one like video on the stonewall and decided he was going to play that. And so I was kind of bracing myself for that. And so he played e6. And I'd watched this game back in December where white played b3, and I was like, okay, let's just do this. And there's actually a really interesting idea behind this. Let's say if black plays d5, I can play this move d4. And we've now gotten like ourselves a main line stonewall defense, but I haven't developed my knight yet, and that's a big plus for white. And now knight h3 is definitely a possibility. And for those of you guys who are familiar with the stonewall, white is simply going to play moves like knight d2, knight f3, bring this knight to f4, maybe later to d3, and make this game entirely about the e5 square. Meanwhile, black is going to have a hard time playing for knight e4 because at any moment we could play f3 and kick this knight. So it actually becomes very difficult for black to get the kind of position that he wants even after setting up the pawn structure. So that was my idea by playing b3. So basically what I'm doing is I'm kind of trying to chunk down, like, okay, what setups does he have left? And so I got him to play a committal move in bishop to e7. And I say committal, and the reason for that is, well, I kind of know now, and I played bishop b2 during the game, if he goes for a stonewall, the bishop's not on d6, and the bishop belongs on e7 in the stonewall. I'm still going to go for, okay, I'm going to play d4 first, and let's say he plays c6. I'm still going for knight h3, but this bishop would have been better placed here, and without this bishop on d6, I don't need to worry about countering bishop d6 with bishop f4 first, right? So that subtle move order change got him to basically say, I'm probably not playing this stonewall. All right, so I kind of took away one idea from him. So he's probably going to go for a classical Dutch at this point, probably something like d6, castles, and that's what I expected. Now my opponent, after bishop b2, he played a6, and he kind of goes off of the wire here, because his idea is he wanted to fianchetto, and so he wastes a bunch of moves, basically, to set this up. And so, like, okay, obviously you don't want to play like black did here, but I kind of realized here that a6 is only two ideas. One is to potentially play b5, and the other one is to play rook a7, bishop b7. If your opponent plays something that's a little bit weird at the opening, don't be afraid to rule out potentially weird ideas, and just kind of say, like, okay, well, if that's like the only possible reason why black played this, let's just take that idea away. And so basically every single one of my moves between now and when the game is basically over is just about shutting down this light squared bishop. So knight c3, rook a7, d3. And so what I've just done is, remember how before I said if black played d5, I'm going to play d4. But now the position is going to be different. He's going to try to do something like this. Well, if he wants to have a bishop on b7 and a knight on f6, that's fine. He wants to play for the e4 square. So by playing this move d3, I've just taken that away. And so he's kind of quickly making these moves. I'm playing knight f3 to kind of preserve the light squared bishops, bishop b7, castles. And so he's made 1, 2, 3, 4 moves to put this bishop on b7. But what are the benefits? Well, you can't put a knight on any one of these squares, so then this bishop on b7 is not as well placed as it could be. And he's not going to be able to trade off light squared bishops, so that's also kind of a detriment for black as well. Now, black really went off the grid here with rook g8 and just kind of fell apart after e4, f takes e. I sacrificed a pawn here. He could have played bishop takes, but my idea is still going to be the same. He's really weak. He's in the center. I could even play moves like rook e1 and just kind of tie him down. Queen d3 or queen c2 also look pretty good with the idea hitting on h7. So he's just falling apart here. So he took with a knight. Knight takes, bishop takes, knight e5. And my idea is that if he plays bishop takes g2, this is simply not going to be good news for black. That's mate on the board. So that's not good. And he realized quickly here that if he plays bishop g6, I'm simply going to take, play a move like queen d3, and he's going to have to play king f7, after which bishop e4 is simply crushing. He's no development. The point of having developed all of his bishops is to trade it off for a knight, which hasn't really done that much and ruined his pawn structure, so that was kind of an opening failure. So he played bishop f5, and I kind of mopped it up. So nothing too special here. I threw in g4, he played d6, and I played rook a d1. The idea being that if he plays bishop d6, we've got mate, and if he plays king c8, we take. Notice that c6 is taken away by the bishop, so he just resigned here, and rightfully so. I mean, okay, obviously players who play the Dutch aren't going to play the Dutch like this, but this just goes to show what happens if you find an idea in your opponent's setup. Sometimes the awkward development makes it really hard to find a right plan. And to kind of further illustrate this, I'm going to show a game that I played a couple years ago, and I talked about it a little bit when I had played it on Chess Summit, about a game I played against a Stonewall. Now in this game, I played knight f3, and my deliberate intention was to take out e5. My opponent was unrated, so I just figured it will take away his ability to control the center, and he immediately went for the Stonewall. Now, knight c3 is kind of a tempting option, or to have played knight c3 before, but the problem is this is actually a really annoying line, and this knight gets kicked to a3, that you would have to know basically if you're playing white. I just didn't want to deal with this. And so I kind of took away that idea and I just castled. We kind of know already that black is never going to take here. Already queen a4 will just regain the pawn, and that's going to be perfectly fine. He's going to have these two awkward pawns, not ideal. And so after I castled, he played this move c6. And now what black is hoping for is that white will play this move d4 and kind of give black the typical Stonewall setup. Notice how because I don't have knight h3, black is kind of getting the traditional play that he's used to, and it's going to be a little bit harder for me to regroup and take control of the e5 square. Meanwhile, black is playing moves like knight e4. And so because of that, it's important that white doesn't kind of fall for this. And I feel like there's a couple moves that could work here. b3, which kind of transposes into the last game, would work a little bit, but I want to have a little bit more of an effective setup. Remember, black's main goal in these kind of positions is to wait for d4 to control the e4 square, so I played this move d3 to just kind of take that away. Again, not this one. We're not really worried about this because this trade is ultimately good for me. And if he plays d4, I mean, this is really, we're going to get a Benoni at some point. And this should be relatively good for me as well. I can also play for e3 and try to undermine that center. Notice how black's used a lot of moves moving his pawns, and his king's still stuck in the center. So, again, not ideal. Alright, so he kind of continued with like this typical Stonewall development, and now you're going to learn another plan about playing against the Stonewall. Well, now that he's played bishop d6, I can play knight c3 because d4 I can just take this. That's cool. Notice that there's no like bishop takes g3 tactics because I can insert with a tempo on the queen, and that'll be great. So that works out. So knight c3, knight bd7, and I took once. And the idea here is I'm kind of waiting to see what is black going to do, because, you know, typically you would like to take this way, right? But one of the problems with this kind of setup sometimes is that your king is still stuck in the center of the board. And in this case, you know, I could be playing for e4, and your king is wide open. So for example, e4, takes, knight g5. All of a sudden I'm hitting the bishop, I'm hitting the pawn. His king is still undeveloped. He's going to have to waste a move on something like bishop e7. I could take with the bishop, I could have taken with a knight. But I mean, I can already just go for some simple stuff. And if he has to move one of these pawns, he's made a big weakness. He'd probably play knight f6 there, but I think you guys get my point. Knight takes is also, you know, this is probably the move I would play with the idea of like knight d6 check. So already black is in a lot of trouble. So because of that, he played c takes d, and I still played e4. This is a really strong idea and a lot of these stonewalls, and ultimately black is out of book because now he can't really get his line. And this is one of the things, I coached some students who've played the Dutch before, and unless they've got like a really strong understanding of how to play it, I usually don't recommend that they do, because now what does black do? Like, none of the correct ideas are cohesive with what you want to do in the stonewall. After castles, I decided I want to play bishop to g5. They just simply pin the knight to the queen. He played queen e8, and I played rook e1, simply with the idea that taking one of these pawns is going to pin this e6 pawn to the queen, so he played queen g6. I took here, and now he played rook takes f6, which obviously loses to e5, and I went shortly therefore after. Knight f6 would have the same fate. Already after a move like queen takes f6, I mean, there's a lot of different possibilities here. For one, I can just take on d5 and play moves like queen to b3. I mean, this is never going to be worse, and you don't really have to see that much farther than this. And there's also some other ideas of like moves like knight b5 and stuff. And there's some, if you look at this with an engine, there's some concrete options too. But the point is that black's kind of central structure of what he wanted to achieve in the Dutch has failed. And this is usually pretty good for white. And just kind of a cohesive wrap-up. Let's go over the game that I quickly played last night against Balin. I know it was kind of not that great of a game in terms of overall quality, but I think it'll further my point. Again, we were supposed to play openings that we had never studied before, so I thought with a Dutch I could get a simple setup, and even I was like tricked by this a little bit, because originally I wanted to get a classical birds, and I think white took like the right approach. But here he played d5, and I quickly realized that not only am I out of book, but my idea of being able to play d6 and e5 is not going to be realized soon. I played queen c8 during the game, which is, the Twitch chat kind of let me know. Ginger GM says this is the incorrect move, and white actually did a really good job of punishing me here, because this is not a free pawn, thanks to all of the different possibilities with knight f7. There's nothing I can do to stop this. And now this is just a mop-up. But there's only one move in this position that actually works for black, and that's this move queen to e8. But even during the stream, I was a little bit skeptical, because already we have some weak squares, and black is not exactly getting the kind of position that he wants. Meanwhile, white can play moves like queen c2, b3, bishop b2, or stuff like this, and like play like normal moves and just be obscenely better. So I decided against not going for this for that reason. And like, this is another one of those cases, right? Like with the Dutch, like in a romantic kind of like light, like the kind of positions, the dream positions of the Dutch seem really appealing, but when you get down to like the different variations that you have to know and like the different ideas that you have to understand, like basically by memory, it becomes really difficult, to play these positions. And so, basically the key lesson that I'll say out of this is like, if you're trying to pick out new openings, you want to stick to something that's a little bit more classical, and it's not going to kind of crumble at key critical tests, right? Like, arguably you could say, okay, well, there's theory and queen e8's not losing, but I can tell you that I'm already a little bit uncomfortable here playing black. This is not the kind of position that I want, and if I wanted something sharp, why don't I just play like a Benoni or a King's Indian or something, right? Obviously the rules of the game that we set meant that I couldn't do that, but if this were a tournament game, I wouldn't choose the Dutch just because I wanted something sharp. And there's other tests of the Dutch too. For example, I didn't play f5 on move 1 because I didn't know if he knew the Staunton Gambit, and like that's a big deal for me. Like, if he knows this, I don't know this. Like I'm gonna wind up, getting crushed. And the same thing goes for the birds. Actually, e5 is a critical test. After which, actually, I think the King's Gambit might be the best option for white. And so, I hope what you took away from this video, and it was a little bit longer than I was hoping for, was that when you're picking out your openings, especially with black, you want to find something that's going to be concrete, and that when your opponent has ideas that are pretty human, like attacking the center or like breaking your pawn structure, do you know how to handle all of them? And if that's not the case, and if that's not for you, then don't try to force yourself to learn that opening. I think that's a really important lesson that, when I talk to some 1700s, they just really don't understand. So that's going to do a wrap on this video. If you're going to be in Chicago in this weekend, make sure to tell me hi. I will be there. And thanks for recognizing the work that Chess Summit does, and the stream that I run with chess.com. Remember, you can still get really cool gear on Teespring. I'll put the link below in the chat. Make sure to check that out. My next article or video, we'll see how it goes, will be in roughly 2 weeks. I'll be in the middle of my vacation, so I don't know how exactly that'll work, but we'll make something work out. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video. It was fun kind of going over all this with you guys. And until next time, I'll see you guys, YouTube.